Right action is part of the virtue or sila aspect of the Eightfold Path. It consists of three primary precepts for laypeople. These are no killing, no stealing, and no sexual misconduct. However, it must be assumed that all five precepts of Buddhism also apply to this limb of the Eightfold Path, the rest being no lying or deceiving and no consumption of intoxicants. So it's implied. Right action is the result of having the right perspective and understanding of things, right view. It's to have morals and act according to them. Just because somebody doesn't do bad things doesn't mean that they are intrinsically immoral. Your ability to maintain right action depends on the quality of your mind and your comprehension of existential truths. An infant, for example, generally doesn't have the ability to commit wrong actions, but still carries the potential to do this once he or she grows older. There was a tragedy that happened in a Tibetan village a very long time ago because the monks were not certain in how to maintain right action whilst following the ahimsa observance, which is the observance of non-violence. And what happened was the village got raided by an army of bandits. And the monks, thinking that they shouldn't do anything about it because it could cause harm, they just let it all happen. So this was a terrible mistake. This was not right action. Passively letting everything just happen in life is not the right way to practice. To practice renunciation and ahimsa. All observances and precepts require some level of skillfulness. Self-defense, for example, is a necessary practice. We need to protect ourselves in all the different aspects of our lives. Lay people need to earn and save money in order to survive. All of us need to eat and exercise in order to stay alive and healthy, and likewise, we need to act on self-defense whenever forced, or rather faced with physical threats. It would otherwise be a complete waste of the human opportunity to give up all of one's resources and time just for the sake of renunciation or for the sake of the non-violence precept. Giving all of your things away that you need, it's like eating that single grain of rice a day. It's not sustainable. You're not going to live that way. And that's what the Buddha did for 6 years, and it was unhealthy. So the first precept, no killing, reflects the ahimsa principle. The philosophy means to avoid physical harm whilst developing compassion at the same time, and respect and a sense of connectedness with living creatures, all living things. This precept is not only concerned with intentional killing, but also actions that indirectly cause harm to others. This can include harmful occupations, harmful activities, and neglect that leads to suffering and death. This is very important to understand because most of us are not murderers, and some of us work in places like slaughterhouses, however, or meat factories and gun factories. It could be anything, cigarette factories, or in the military. The karma involved in these occupations can range between first-degree and second-degree murder, manslaughter, in which deaths are occurring unintentionally due to the third-party assistance of employees or providing these kinds of companies. A soldier in the military, for example, is not exempt from the karma that accrues from killing enemy soldiers at war just because he or she is doing their job. It doesn't work that way. Actions are actions. The severity of karma accrued from killing varies more significantly depending on factors like whether or not it was first degree or assisted or unintentional or suicide, or whether the victim was an insect, an animal, or a human being. Now, other forms of murder include euthanasia, which is the consented murder of a suffering or old person. performed by a doctor usually, and then likewise abortion. It's another form. These are all different forms of that. So against the first precept. And however, choosing to not prolong life is not murder. Consequences of murder tend to be early death or the same or similar murder against the killer in the next life. It is one of the most serious crimes in Buddhism because it's understood that the act of taking the life of another being prematurely delays their opportunity to work on themselves spiritually. They're taking the greatest opportunity away from them, both to experience life and to work on themselves to take on the Dharma through human life. So that's why animal life is generally less severe, because they can't take on the Dharma. They can't practice. It's not as valuable. The second precept is no stealing. Aside from avoiding the inconveniences and karma that comes from stealing things, another purpose of this precept is to develop contentment and generosity and respect for others, as well as dignity for oneself. This is the philosophy behind any kind of stealing. Even if something is very small, like a pencil, an eraser from some big company you work for, it's not always about the inconvenience that stealing causes for others. It's about having the integrity and dignity to not selfishly deceive or cheat people through lying and stealing at any level. So stealing is below your dignity as an ethical person. It's only in extreme cases that when one's health or life is threatened, when stealing things like medicine, becomes reasonable. Now, sexual misconduct, that is the third precept. For lay people, this precept encourages students to only engage in sexual relations that maintain integrity and consent and respect. The extent of brahmacharya, or sexual purity, that must be observed varies for lay people, depending on how serious they are, really. But all the schools of Buddhism teach brahmacharya. They encourage it. It's mandatory to properly follow these schools of Buddhism. So that's chastity or abstinence. Now, guidance can be received in meditation or by a guru. The most fundamental rule on sexual purity that all religions teach is chastity or abstinence, which is that abstinence from fornication in particular, not sex, because these are different. Because the whole responsibility or privilege of tantra is tantric sex, which is different, right? That's part of the doctrine. So there is sexual purity that must be maintained for couples who are practicing suprasexuality or tantra or vajrayana. This primarily requires abstaining from having the orgasm and other unnecessary and perverted sexual behaviors. Buddhism doesn't teach much about same-sex relationships or marriages, other than explaining that same-sex relationships are not conducive to any kind of creation. This is just for lay people, because once you're a monk, the traditional rules apply. So lay Buddhist practitioners who are just going at their own pace. Certain texts include rules against cheating on one's spouse, having more than one partner at a time, and obvious things like sexual harassment and sexual abuse are not acceptable. So for the monks, the monastics, and anyone who's serious, the homosexual relationship is just completely unnecessary. You cannot create solar bodies. The Merkaba you can't create life through by when you engage the same cosmic polarities in your body, because the human body is a battery. So it's something that you have to renounce sex if you're going to be with this partner, and any kind of sex that you're having is just another desire, like any other desire. If it's not necessary, it's a desire. And then the question is, why are you with your partner? Well, you have some kind of connection with them, so you can stay with your partner, but both of you have to work on chastity then. Sexual rules provides us with a sense of safety as well. So things like the legal age of consent is more like a property law that prevents people from stealing each other's personal space. For monastics or anyone under a Dhamma, which in this context is a precept or philosophy from a particular religious school, these must be given due regard. Sexual actions are distinct from all other actions that can be taken. The orgasm is the most powerful expulsion of pranic energy that a person can release. So sexual actions have more impact on our body and karmically than other kinds of actions.